The biggest battle we will ever have to face is the battle between you and you. It's the battle of taking your mind to that limit and then breaking through. On the Mindful Experiment podcast, we will share concepts, universal laws, and interviewing individuals who have done just that, who have gone through the dark times and through those moments allowed their light to shine bright. I'm your host, Dr. Vic Manzo, and I want to thank you for listening to the podcast and taking this journey with me as we discover different avenues to break through those limits, expand your reality, and evolve into the person you desire to be. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Dr. Vic, and you are listening to the Mindful Experiment. I am so excited to have you here as we go ahead every week and interview someone who is really changing the course, helping enhance humanity, working on mindset, mindfulness, really shifting gears in some way that affects their life to help them be a better version than who they were yesterday. My guest for today, his name is Thom King. Thom is an awesome guy. We connected so much when it came to the interview, before the interview, during the interview, after the interview. There will definitely be a part 2, maybe even a part 3, just because we connected so much. Thom's he's a part CEO, he's a part personal development wonk, and part biohacker info geek. He is the self-confessed serial entrepreneur. While his favorite book list contains many success-oriented and personal development classics, the traditional definition of achieving success, making a lot of money and all that, is not what inspires or motivates King. He follows more of a you aren't doing well unless you're also doing some good line of thinking. King's company has been built around the simple principle of do the right thing. Thom is, he's been in he's a personal passion for food and is concerned over the explosion of metabolic disease that led him to found the Steviva Brands, now known as Icon Foods, with a mission to stem the tide of this diabesity by providing consumers healthy alternatives to sugar. He has also in recent years, his passion for food and his optimal health have intersected with his embrace of a ketogenic, low-carb, high-fat diet. Thom's latest project is a line of ketogenic condiments intended to help more people successfully adopt a healthier lifestyle. I will be posting, as Thom shared with me, some of his condiments that he had, and I'll be sharing my opinions and my reviews on those as we dive in. I was so excited to find barbecue sauce with no sugar and MCT oil put in there. I was like, sign me up. So we'll be definitely showcasing and sharing as we use them. But Thom, we had a great time talking in depth about so many different things, about diabesity, the role of mindfulness, and so much more. So I just don't want to take any more thunder away from this guy. So I'm just excited to share him with you. Everyone, this is Thom King. Well, Thom, welcome to the show.
Dr. Vic, thank you so much. I loved our conversation before the show. You taught me so much, and I'm really honored to that you hosted me on your podcast.
I'm a blast to have you on. I saw, Guy Gone Keto. I've been in keto for 12 years. I'm just like, I can't wait to pick your brain and see how you got into it, all that fun stuff. So we're going to dive deep here.
Nice. I'm ready for it.
So before we begin, I'd love for you just to share with the listeners and everybody, like, what is it you do?
Well, okay. So my main job is I'm the CEO of a food company called Icon Foods, and we are a fairly substantial ingredient supplier. We supply sweeteners to food to companies that manufacture sports nutrition drinks and bars, and so that's kind of our primary focus. And then the Guy Gone Keto line of condiments in the book, that's kind of my side hustle because, I'm passionate about it.
I love it. How passionate are you with food? When did it all begin? What inspired you to get into food?
Well, I grew up on a farm, like a ranch actually, and I've always been pretty close to nature. So I've been fascinated with food on and off since I was a kid. I would say that I've become more fascinated with it as I've gained knowledge about how the food affects the body and mind. But I would say for the past good 15, 20 years, I've been super fascinated with food. And in the past 4 years, very dedicated to a ketogenic lifestyle.
I love it. So you grew up on a farm. This is a different passion of mine. One of my goals is to have a farm and live on it.
Nice.
I literally just got chickens like 3.5 weeks ago. I've been loving them since. They're so tranquil and so peaceful. And my wife looks at me sometimes. She's like, I don't get it. You're treating the chickens better than you treat the dog. And I'm just like, hey, I give to them. They actually give me something tangible back. I'm like, I love the intangibles he gives me, but this is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the big question is, do you have a rooster?
No, we do not. We can't have it where we live.
Yeah, that's good because the eggs turn out differently. A rooster, and we had chickens growing up. We had chickens, but then in our old location, for our business, we had chickens there, and the guy I got the chickens from convinced me to take this rooster from him. So occasionally we'd crack open an egg, and there'd be a surprise for us.
Oh no! Yeah, no, it's but I don't know. My wife's like, I don't know if we'll ever want a rooster because they're very feisty, and they protect the girls and everything, which I get that, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind the 4 o'clock, whatever it is, 5 o'clock in the morning. Noises they make, I appreciate that because I'm up.
I think the side benefit of getting higher protein eggs is probably what you want to avoid having a rooster.
So having your passion into food, I'm always curious to know about people. How did you get into keto? What moved you that way? What was the journey to go that route?
Well, I've always battled with my weight, and I discovered keto, but back in the day, and I'd say maybe 15 or 20 years ago, but it was referred to as Atkins. And I didn't feel like Atkins was really, really keto as much as it was just low carb, high protein, which isn't really keto. So, I dabbled with sort of a pseudo ketogenic diet whenever I would start to feel fat. So, and that's sort of the product of dieting, because I think that it's a better approach to actually lean into a lifestyle change rather than a diet, because what was happening is I'd get a little fat and I'd go on a keto diet and I would lose the weight, and then a few months later I'd gain that weight back plus some.
Gotcha.
So I refer to it as the yo-yo diet. And, I think about 4 years ago, I hit a threshold. I was in Las Vegas for a trade show, and one of my customers took me out to dinner, and I just way overdid it. I had a steak and potato and cake, and we shared a bottle of wine. And I got back up to the room and looked in the mirror, and I'm like, what's going on here? I have a business that caters to sports nutrition and companies that produce ketogenic products, and I was anything but healthy. I was carrying 35 pounds of extra weight. My blood pressure was 199 over 90, and then I was on blood pressure meds. I had terrible heartburn, and I think that the pain of all of those things had exceeded the pleasure that I was getting from pizza and pie and donuts, and and at that point I just started writing it down. I started writing down what I was eating. I started data collection about my weight, my blood pressure, my resting heart rate, all of these things I started writing down, and lo and behold, a year later I actually had a book. So
nice.
That's how this all sort of organically took place.
And I'll definitely get back to the book here in just a second. But I'm curious to know, because there's so much out there about keto and the ketogenic diet, so many things people experience. Can you just share with us, when you started to go the keto route, did you experience, what did you notice? Like, did you get like the famous keto flu or the keto breath? What was your journey because I know people start keto and it's never sometimes fun for them. And but curious to know what was your experience through it all?
I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem becoming fat adapted. Like, I never experienced the keto flu. I've known people that have, and it's been my experience that if you hydrate and make sure that your electrolytes are adequate, that you can kind of avoid that keto flu. And I think also keto breath. I still run into people that get that, and I don't think I get it, but you never know. Like, are people going to tell you, hey, your breath smells like crap? If they're good friends, they probably will, or family. Yeah. But, I haven't had any complaints, and it doesn't seem like I have it, but I've definitely run into people that practice, nutritional ketosis, and their breath gets pretty funky. I think it's just because they're not hydrating enough and their electrolytes are down.
Yeah. You brought up Atkins real quick. I love to just bring that back. So what is the difference from your perspective of Atkins versus keto? How are they different?
Protein. So the Atkins diet was a low carb, moderate fat, and high protein diet. And so a high protein diet can put you into keto. I've noticed a lot of people that I interact with are now practicing what's called keto carnivore, which I thought at first was kind of interesting, but the more I drilled into it, it just scares me. Like, I don't think, eating a ribeye, 2 ribeyes a day and slathering them with butter I don't think that's smart. So I would say the biggest difference between the Atkins and keto is the levels of protein, because if you have too much protein on a ketogenic diet, that protein is going to get stored in your muscles as glycogen, and you're never going to successfully get into deep ketosis.
Very true. Very, very true. What are some of the myths that you experience, you've heard about when it comes to the ketogenic diet? Because I know you were mentioning the whole keto carnivore, and that sounds like some of it. But do you mind sharing some myths that you have come across and heard about?
Well, most of them are attacks, I think, from people that are vegans. I was getting an IV vitamin push about 2 months ago, and a woman peeked behind the curtain. She said, "Hey, you're that keto guy." And I'm like, "Okay, guilty as charged." And then she's like, "I don't know how you can live with yourself, because all you do is eat bacon and cheese, and and you're just killing these poor animals." And I'm like, "Well, wait a second. I think that you might be misunderstanding keto, because I eat a lot of vegetables. Like, I don't eat potatoes and vegetables that are high glycemic, but I eat a lot of leafy greens and celery and lettuce, cauliflower, broccoli, all of the cruciferous vegetables. So that makes up a pretty big part of my diet. So I would say that for the biggest misunderstanding that people have about a keto diet is that that all you're doing is eating bacon and cheese, but that is completely and totally inaccurate. So I do, I keep my carbs, under, say, 10% of my total macros. But I mean, you can eat a lot of lettuce and a lot of kale and a lot of broccoli and still keep yourself in keto.
It's so true. I remember a little bit ago, maybe 6 months ago, I was running like a little keto program in my office, and just for patients. And it was funny because they were like, I was showing my ratios and like, how are you consuming 75% fat? How is this happening? Right. So a vegan would appreciate this, because I tell them I snack on nuts.
Yeah.
That's my snack. Macadamia nuts. You get a quarter cup of that. That's like 20 something grams of fat.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to say that's a big part of my mainstay as well. Like, I eat a ton of nuts, macadamia nuts and Brazil nuts and almonds, and I do eat a lot of avocados as well. And and I supplement with some MCT oil.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think that's the misconception too with people when it comes to a keto diet. They think it's just that, and then you have to, or you got to have a lot of butter, or you got to be doing a lot of oils. And I'm like, those are all part of it, but there's a whole other side when you just break it down with nuts and seeds alone. That alone can take care of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also get people asking me, is like vegan keto possible? And I'm like, absolutely, by all means.
I'm waiting for that title, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I've been having a lot of people push me on that too. And it's like, yeah, why don't you try going vegan? And, and I'm considering it for the next book and, just writing a book on, on vegan keto, because I think that it's pretty easy to do. Like I sometimes try to refrain from eating a lot of meat and dairy, and in those incidences, it's mashed up nuts and avocado, and I mean there's coconut oil. There's so many things that you can eat that that are plant based that will put you in some pretty deep ketosis.
I think that's the next movement, just because, then it stops the whole war on vegan versus paleo or keto. And it'll just be like, okay, here you go. Here's a keto vegan process. I think you're the guy to do it.
I do like a good ribeye though. So it would be sort of a temporary thing, probably 90 to 100 days, and just, tracking my, my ketone levels and, and I guess talking about it.
Yeah, because I mean, the whole process of writing your book, I know you mentioned a little bit about this, was your book you wrote, Guy Gone Keto. It was just a journal thing, right? Was that basically the process, or was there other things put into it also?
I put some recipes in it, but by and large, it's just the process that it took, because it does require a certain level of discipline. And these things, I think this isn't just with keto. I think it's any time that you want to make a change or a shift in your life. It requires discipline. Like you can't do it without discipline. And I would have to say that the biggest, I would say the focal point of the book is where to find that discipline, how to leverage that discipline, into taking action. And yeah, so I would say that rather than it just being sort of a diet book, it was a conversation that I had with myself. Like, how am I going to leverage this pain, the pain of being fat and unhealthy? How am I going to leverage that into being motivated to not eat pizza and bread and, and French fries?
I love that. And with that mind shift, anything help you in that process to make that kind of a shift? Because I know with the body, there's a lot of carb addiction, sugar addiction, hormones aren't regulated unless, if you're fast at fat adapting, then it changes that ball game. But is it, did you do any like practices to help you with being disciplined? Because I know there's people 100%. Out there who,
yeah, 100%. So, I mean, one of the things that really, really helped me with discipline was creating a schedule for myself and creating what I call my hour of power. So when I get up in the morning, one of the first things that I do is I just start writing. So I journal every single day, and I just never ever miss out on it, and I usually start my journal by, asking myself questions like, how do I feel? And, did I practice restraint? And that means restraint of maybe overindulging in foods that aren't very good for me, or maybe even restraint of, egocentric things. So, I mean, it's just a sort of that daily reflection, and then creating sort of outcomes that I want to create and manifest, and then finishing it up with affirmations of why these things are important to me. And, and so journaling was a big step. So I do that first thing in the morning, followed by about a 3.5 mile run, and then a workout. And then the one thing that really, really helps is yoga and meditation. So I think practicing both yoga and meditation allows you to bring mindfulness into your life. And I think part of the whole discipline of eating better is being mindful of what you put in your mouth.
So true in so many ways. I've linked up with someone in my town that I work in, and we did a whole thing on mindfulness eating, and it's slow. One thing about mindfulness is, I know you can relate, is just slowing down and appreciating what you have. But you brought up another point about being mindful of what you're eating. Where does it come from? The source, the sustainable, all that stuff too. Yep. It's a big game changer.
It is. And, I do get a hard time from a lot of people that practice veganism, and I'm a huge proponent of eating less meat. And I think that if people, if consumers were more involved, in how proteins are harvested, like beef and chicken and pork, like really what is that process? And I mean, this might sound extreme, but I'm also a big proponent of hunting. If you actually have to hunt for your meal or you're actively involved in that and, and intimate with harvesting that animal, it gives you a way, way deeper appreciation. Like if I'm going to eat meat, if there's bones, I save the bones and make the broth. So I think that any time that you're not mindful and you're not using every single part of that animal, that it's disrespectful.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's, I mean, like I said, I just got chickens a few weeks ago, and it have built I don't know, like my wife's like, are we going to, because we have a couple that are lay egging and meat. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to kill it. I'm just not, I'd rather just, just let it live a wonderful life, appreciate what it gave. She's like, so it's a pet. I'm like, yeah, it's a pet. I'll take that. But I agree with you. I mean, back in the day, humans in general had such a great bond with their animals. They took care of them. They raised them right. And they gave them somewhat of a life. And then, then that time came and, for the animal. But people sometimes try to, fortunately with humans, we like to humanize everybody, everything. I mean, they do it with our dogs. We do it with, and, I've heard that people sometimes say, but in the animal world, it's a whole different world on how they see things versus how we do.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I grew up on a ranch, so I've had a connection with animals, ever since I was a child. Like we had cattle and horses and geese and chickens. So I mean, and I've actually been there, when my father harvested some of those animals, and it really. You look at things from a completely different perspective, like, and I think that maybe you don't lean into animals being sentient like human beings as much if you grow up on a ranch, because I know that there's vegans that insist that fish have some sort of soul. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, you don't see too many fish reading the New York Times.
At least we don't know, right?
It's true. They make it a version that we don't understand.
I love it. I saw also that you are a part biohacker info geek. I would love to dive into that because I'm a geek myself in biohacking, and I just love to geek out sometimes with people. So biohacking, what do you do with it? Like, because I know keto, there's a lot of biohacks with the brain and stuff, but what do you do in the biohacking aspect?
I used to do some hacking with with introducing exogenous ketones.
Nice.
But what I found I just don't think that there's any sort of shortcuts. No. So I think that if you're taking, like things like beta hydroxybutyrate, in salts or esters, that you run the risk of your liver saying, hey, you know what, I don't need to do this anymore. So I found that, taking those shortcuts is not as productive. So, and also taking a variety of different, herbal supplements, in a form of like nootropics. Mm-hmm. I think that runs into a situation of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I'm not sure if the outcome of that is ever really great. I would have to say that my latest and greatest and probably the most fascinating hacks have to do with the microbiome. Like introducing a variety of different types of bacteriophage as well as bacteria, and then feeding them with soluble and non-soluble fibers, and then having my stool, sample sent in to see what my the diversity is of my microbiome. So I would say that that's probably where I'm mostly focused on my biohacking right now, and what I find to be most fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's an untapped world that's very exciting in the science world of what's coming out to be. Have you noticed like certain foods or certain things, like even with keto, has helped you in some ways in the microbiome at all?
Yeah, I do. I think going keto did absolutely make a shift in my microbiome. I mean, and I kind of have the sort of documentation to show it, because I have my microbiome actually tested once a month to once every other month, so I can see which colonies of bacteria are actually growing and which are smaller, and then also what sort of, I guess, pathogenic or unfriendly bacteria are going on in there. And I think mostly I would say that I can really recognize a shift when I'm not eating enough fiber or vegetables and I'm eating too much protein. I can see the diversity of my microbiome kind of drop some. So I would say that's, yeah, definitely diet's got a huge impact on that, and not eating enough fiber has a major impact.
No, massively. I'm actually, funny we're talking about microbiome, and I'm prepping for a talk this week on it. And it's one of the things that I kept seeing come up about fiber and a lot of research. And I'm just like, interesting. And the different roles of what it plays and how it helps with the microbiome in the gut and so forth.
Yeah, and I take a combination of both soluble and non-soluble fibers. So like I'll mix it up and have like psyllium and inulin, and then in that I drop in some bentonite and some berberine.
Nice.
And it's a little tonic that I have, and then I'll take some probiotics with it, because I feel like if you've got those fibers going on, that the likelihood of that bacteria actually making it through your stomach and into your gut, I think that it really increases the chances of that happening.
Massively. Yeah, no, totally. It plays the more you can like give it its nutrients of what it needs when you take with probiotics, the better it will adhere to the GI lining.
Yeah, absolutely. And and as far as my geeking out on stuff, so I love to read medical journals. Just
nice.
For entertainment. And I also like to sneak into like workshops and conferences. So I'd say a couple months ago, I attended a conference that was all focused on fecal transplants.
Oh yeah,
and that is something that I mean I find super fascinating. Like they were talking about the efficacy of treating C. diff with a fecal transplant, like was close to 90%, which is crazy because antibiotics won't touch that. So things going on in the bacteria world, I mean, completely and totally amaze me.
It's so funny. Actually, I'll help you geek out a little bit. They're doing, so there's a lot of studies on that. And what they're doing now is they found out they're trying to figure out, I forget what it is. It's an RNA. I can't remember if it's single RNA or some RNA that exists in basically the fecal. And what they're trying to figure out is what binds it, why is it there, and they're trying to kind of shift gears from taking someone's poop, put it in yourself, or vice versa. Yeah. And they're looking at how can they just figure out the genetic sequencings of all that, and then be able to grow that and be able to just put that in instead, and you don't have to deal with all the other stuff that comes with it,
like the poop.
Yeah, like the poop. You can kind of avoid that part. Some people listening right now, you're probably like, what are these guys talking about?
I know. So when I was at that conference, the doctor who was speaking there said, asked questions, and she said, what do you think is more effective? Having a fecal transplant done rectally or orally? And I'm like, whoa, rectally? And she's like, false. She's like, orally is just as effective. And I'm like, how does this happen? And so she explained that what they do is they spin it down. They take the fecal matter, put it in a blender, and then you put it in a centrifuge and spin it down until it's concentrated. They put it into capsules and then they freeze it. And so the one thing that she brought up that was just this mind-blowing, moment for me is she said that they sterilized it. In some cases, they'll sterilize it, but it still is as effective as before it was sterilized, which really brings up the question of, okay, so is it the metabolite that's actually treating, the C. diff, or what is it? I mean, and then you realize we don't even know what we don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. You sterilize it and it still gets the same effects. That baffles me too.
Yeah, like what is that? I mean, is it because, okay, so they killed the bacteria, but there's still viruses in there? So is there a bacteriophage that's actually, treating the C. diff, or is it the metabolite from the bacteria? It raises all these questions, and it makes me just want to quit my job and and pursue this, because I'm like, I have to know. Like, I just need to know this. So, yeah.
I know your feelings on that very much. Real quick for the listeners, can you just tell them what a bacteriophage is so they know?
So a bacteriophage is actually a virus. So they're called bacteriophage, but they're actually a virus, and I like to refer to them as the Dexters of viruses. So they're actually viruses that prey on other viruses. So if you Google it, it's really cool to see what a bacteriophage looks like, because it looks like a little spaceship. And so this little spaceship called a bacteriophage will attach itself, to cells, and then it drives a probe into the cell and deposits an enzyme that puts that cell into autophagy, meaning it just sort of implodes on itself. And when you see this and you understand that there's literally trillions of these in your body, it's like you have this colony or this village that lives inside of you that is doing some really, really remarkable, amazing stuff. So that's my version of a bacteriophage.
Yeah, you said it very elegantly, and they're pretty cool. They kind of keep things in balance, and they kill things off that don't belong in us, which is really, really cool.
Well, I hope at some point in time that science finds a way to be able to, work with these bacteriophage to ultimately replace antibiotics, which, in my opinion, end up making us sicker than they do actually making us better.
No, couldn't agree with you more. I mean, antibiotics are so detrimental to our health in so many different ways. And I see this first forefront with kids. And every time I see a kid on antibiotics, I'm always like, a healthy developing gut, helping develop the nervous system. It all works together. And then we have to try to replenish that.
So here's a question. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, how do you replenish that?
Replenish the gut?
Yeah.
So prebiotics, probiotics blend, I always recommend. And then, look at what are things that also will kind of decrease the good bacteria, processed sugar, refined carbs, those types of things. Mm-hmm. And then how do we get more fermented food within us?
Yes.
I'm a big fan of fermented foods.
Yep. Same here.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, it varies. So like I usually like to make a 12 strain sort of a kefir, if you will. So like nice. A 12 strain probiotic drink that I make with inulin. So I have like a inulin in water substrate and add the probiotic bacteria to it, and then I put it into a pot with a sous vide. And then just let it set there at 100 degrees for 100 hours. And it's actually, pretty delicious. It tastes very similar to yogurt. That's one thing that I do, but I would have to say that I am the self-proclaimed master of kimchi around here.
Oh, really? You have a recipe for it in your book?
I don't. I didn't include, but I could certainly post it. And I always mix it up too. Like I never want it to be exactly the same. So, sometimes I'll add, more garlic to it, sometimes more Napa cabbage, but I kimchi every single day. And, I push it on other people, whether they like it or not.
Kimchi is one thing I have patients that make sauerkraut. I don't mind the sauerkraut. It's okay. I mean, they make it sometimes where it's not too sour for the sauerkraut. But The kimchi, it's a win for me every time. I have no problem eating kimchi.
Yeah, well, and you can mix it with other things. So, like I'll mix it in with salads, or one thing, like if I'm eating dairy, like I like to mix it with cream cheese, and add some fat to it. So there's a ton of things that you can do with it. You can eat it straight, but you can also use it as almost like a spice or something.
I could see a whole nother podcast episode talking all about this and more. So, I'll make a note of that.
That's the danger. That's the danger of interviewing me.
I love it. No, you're right. You're speaking my passion here, so I love it.
Nice.
Going back, keto diet and everything. Diabetes has tripled. Well, I think more than that now. Since 1992, when they pushed the low-fat diet movement, and all that stuff. How can keto help with metabolic issues that we're seeing in today's world, but also the diabetic issues, or as you have coined here, I see as diabesity?
Diabesity, yeah, that is definitely an epidemic, and what's really sad about it is type 2 diabetes is something you give yourself. I mean, it's a lifestyle disease from eating way too much sugar. And eating too much sugar leads to insulin resistance, and insulin resistance leads to diabetes. So, if you're eating massive amounts of sugar and high glycemic carbohydrates, you're going down a slippery slope, because eventually that will catch up with you. And I don't think I need to go into the health effects of type 2 diabetes. You can blindness, losing limbs, and ultimately death. But I think the bigger factor is that this is a pandemic, and we already have a healthcare system that's not super great. And I mean, let's fast forward 10 to 20 years, because when you look at teenagers and adolescents, and the level of obesity that exists in that particular demographic 10 or 20 years from now, when we have everybody on metformin and diabetes medication, are we really going to be able to afford that? And is it going to end up breaking our healthcare system?
Yeah, you bring up some really strong points. I mean, as diabetes is the one condition that affects every single organ, cell, everything in the body. And it's even more expensive as a cost on healthcare than even cancer, which is the number one, or even heart disease. I know they go back and forth, but it's the most costly disease that's out there.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, and it's sort of a chain reaction, because when you look at I would say the average American diet, I mean, and how much sugar is in it, it's crazy. And when you go to the store, I mean, when you go grocery shopping, I mean, the best way to avoid the added sugars is to not buy anything, processed, or in a can or in a bottle, because, food manufacturers use sugar because it's a subsidized crop. They use sugar to replace actual, good quality ingredients, because sugar is so cheap. So basically, when you pick up a can of anything that you're going to consume, you read the label, look how much sugar's in it, look how much, read the ingredient statement. If you see sugar and salt, that's probably primarily what's in that product. And if you get into the grocery store, stay out of the middle of the grocery store, work the outside of the grocery store, because that's where, they have like the fresh meat and produce, and, those are the things that you want to consume.
No, that's so true on so many levels. And since we're speaking about a grocery store, how did you create Guy Gone Keto condiments? I want to know all about it. We're talking about groceries. I'm thinking, all this stuff. You're talking about kale and all these other things. Let's get into the condiments here.
I wish I could say that was just it was an evil plot or some sort of a plot. But I mean, I have to confess, I made those for myself. So when I adopted the ketogenic lifestyle, I found that I was missing condiments, because when you look at barbecue sauce, barbecue sauce has more sugar than ice cream.
It's crazy.
And, ketchup has more, like when you put ketchup on your French fries, that's like adding a Snickers bar to your to your French fries. And I mean, French fries are already high glycemic, and now you're adding sugar to them. I mean, it's a deadly combination. So yeah, I would like to say that this was like, oh yeah, I really thought this out and planned, but really it was selfish. It was 100% selfish. I wasn't able to have teriyaki sauce or ketchup or barbecue sauce or any of the sauces that I liked. So I mean, we have a 3,000 square foot lab here, and I just went into the lab, and I have a food science background, and I just made the condiments for myself. And then every person who had them was like, "Hey, you should sell those." I'm like, "Hey, that's a good idea." So I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll just have it come out at the same time as the book." And yeah, the condiments have been like seriously flying off the shelves.
I love it. So tell me, how are they different, or what's the uniqueness about them?
Well, we pulled out all of the sugar, because that's what's going to knock you out of keto. And we replaced it with a sweetener that actually just 3 days ago got approved by the FDA to be not listed as an added sugar. And that sweetener is called allulose. So we use allulose, which is a product of fermentation. So it exists in nature in small amounts. It's referred to as a rare sugar. The way it's made is you take a liquid fructose and you add a bacteria to it, and the metabolite, what's created from the bacteria, is allulose, and it's about 70% as sweet as sugar, but has no impact on blood sugar levels, and actually will raise ketones, blood ketones. So these are, that's the sweetener that we use. And then I was just very careful to use ingredients that, that are clean and natural. So we don't have any weird stuff in these condiments. And then I would say that one of the cool things is that we used MCT oil, so multi-chain triglyceride. So we used MCT oil to actually elevate the level of fat that's in these condiments.
That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty genius. I mean, allulose, I've heard a little bit about allulose before. So it's kind of cool how you're using that in your products alone to still give it that sweetness.
Yeah, we have a whole box of this stuff heading your way, so you'll be able to try it out. And I love to get your opinions. But allulose has been pretty amazing for me. Like it just recently, was approved by the FDA, but I've been working with it for the past 5 years, and it's been really, really amazing. So it's still considered a saccharide, which is technically a sugar, but it allows it to participate in what's called the Maillard reaction, and that's a reaction of proteins and sugar that causes caramelization. So if you're baking, allulose is just a really amazing sweetener, and yeah, I'm all in on it.
Cool. I can't wait. I'm excited.
Nice.
Now, is this also part of the whole keto sweet product, or is it something different? Okay.
It is. So the keto sweet line is our allulose line, and because allulose is only 70% as sweet as sugar, we use natural high intensity sweeteners to bring it up to parity with sugar. And so we use a combination of stevia and monk fruit extracts. And so I do get a lot of questions of like, hey, how come you're using both stevia and monk fruit? And then also comments of like, hey, doesn't stevia taste weird? But what we found is that when you have the combination of both stevia and monk fruit, that they actually are able to mask each other's off notes. So it really makes it a really great sweetener.
That's pretty cool. I've heard before too, sometimes with stevia, when you get that metallic taste, sometimes it's more due to the processing and how they process it versus it actually just, being from the plant itself.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, one of the things, the foundation, of our sweetener company is using stevia. And I mean, the companies that we have contracted with to make our stevia for us, I mean, they use natural water extraction methods, and then they use a thing called a resin column, which it is just a natural way to separate out the off notes. So if you do have stevia and it's like, hey, this really tastes terrible, It could be the processing, and it also could just be the grade of stevia that was used.
Interesting. That's pretty good to know. Now, how, with the sweeteners and everything, how do these diets benefit? I mean, obviously you can have more sweets in the diet, but I'll let you dive into deep of how individuals who can use these sweeteners can, let's say they have a sweet tooth, they want to be ketogenic or along those lines, and how can these sweeteners be a game changer?
Well, these sweeteners will not elevate blood sugar levels, and they also won't knock you out of keto. So that's, and if you're a person who suffers from like hypoglycemia, or if you're diabetic, they're not going to affect your insulin levels or your blood sugar levels for that matter. So all of the sweeteners that we work with are completely safe for people that suffer from diabetes, or also suffer from hypoglycemia.
I can see you doing a cookbook on sweets if you haven't already, with your sweeteners and how to utilize them and really maximize this. Because I can see that for myself. Because I mean, I don't get me wrong, I don't have a sweet tooth or anything. I used to, but it's one of those things where I still like to enjoy a sweet from here and there, and I actually get like a high from, oh, guess what? This is keto. This is this. I can have this. I'm staying within my range, and it doesn't mess up my ratios.
Yeah, 100%. Like I really appreciate you said used to have a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
Because I used to have a sweet tooth too. Like it used to be really bad. Like when I was in college, my thing would be to actually have a Pepsi and pour a bag of M&Ms in it because it wasn't quite sweet enough. So I had terrible sugar addiction. And I have to tell you that, being on a ketogenic diet or adopting this lifestyle, over the past 3 years, my sweet tooth is really pretty much gone. I find that if I have a strawberry or a handful of like berries or cherries, that is plenty sweet for me. So it's a cool shift from, somebody who is completely and totally addicted to sugar.
And I appreciate you bringing that last point up, because sometimes people have a piece of fruit and they're kind of like, oh, this is not sweet enough for me. Oh. And I always tell them it's just because you're so conditioned to have such a high load of sweetness in what you eat. Like if you can just step away for a little bit, let the nervous system, let the receptors change, let the body adapt. Yeah. Then all of a sudden you can go have a nice strawberry and be like, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. Because that's the experience I get right now as I have.
100%. Like if I have a strawberry, it's like, oh my God, this is completely and totally amazing. And then my neighbor actually has a house in Palm Desert, so he brings me grapefruit. And so I'll have like half a grapefruit, and I'll just have it, just peel it, just like an orange. And I know the people I work with are like, oh my God, what are you doing with that grapefruit? You have to put some sugar on it. I'm like, are you kidding me? This thing is totally delicious and sweet the way it is.
Yeah, it reminded me when I was in high school where I used to have strawberries. Getting back to the strawberries, they weren't sweet enough, so I would dip them in sugar just so I can get that extra sweetness.
Isn't that crazy? And once you get your diet cleaned up, you just don't have those cravings anymore. And I can't help but think that maybe that has something to do with a shift in your microbiome.
Oh, massively. I agree with you 100%. I'm telling you, we're going to have to do a whole nother podcast just on a microbiome.
I would love to.
Real quick, one last question I have for you is, you got the whole Guy Gone Keto project, and it's all about giving back to the community. I just wanted to give you an opportunity just to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think I've probably given away more books than I've sold. I've gone to dozens of trade shows, and I just bring the books. I bring the books to give away. So, I mean, the whole premise behind the book and behind the brand was contribution. I mean, to really give, to make a positive impact. And I hope that it does. And part of the I guess charities or organizations that we support are really schools, and getting the message to schools and to students that be more involved in your food and look at the things that you're putting into your body. And, for me, that's hugely rewarding when you see that shift happen.
No, massively. I appreciate you doing that. I mean, the schools need all the help in the world. I think that's where kids get indoctrinated to eat certain types of foods and then become conditioned to them.
Yep, completely.
But before we wind up, I want to just ask, how can people get connected with you, your book, Condiments, the whole 9 yards?
You can go to guygoneketo.com. You can direct message me on any of the socials at the @guygoneketo.com. I'm really good at answering all the direct messaging. I'm really good at, at answering the emails that come in off of the website. So if you are considering, adopting a ketogenic lifestyle, or, are practicing keto now and running into, things that you have questions on, like maybe, metabolic flexibility, feel free to shoot me an email. Visit the website. We've got some great posts there. We've got some amazing recipes. So just hit up guygoneketo.com.
Awesome. Thom, I appreciate you. You'll definitely be back. I love conversating with a biohacker geek, and just your passion is the same as my passion. So we just feed off each other.
Brothers from a different mother. I appreciate it, Dr. Vic. Thank you for having me on your show.
It was a pleasure. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. For past shows, please visit www.empoweryourreality.com. I hope this show inspired you and added to your life to help you on the journey to rediscover who you really are. To connect with us on Facebook, please visit www.facebook.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. Check us out on Twitter. The handle is Dr. Vic21. Follow us on Instagram, www.instagram.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. If you were inspired by the podcast, pay it forward by sharing it with someone who you know can benefit from it. Thank you again for listening to the Mindful Experiment podcast, sharing paths to help you rediscover your infinite potential.